Dark to Light and Other Stories. Written by Stephen Filbey. Narrated by Steve Miller. Uncouth Bacilli. It was shortly after 3 a.m. Floyd had dozed off at midnight but was now wide awake. Not so much thoughts as annoyance was lighting up his mind like an arc light at an accident scene. He had accepted the responsibility of covering an English class for a colleague on maternity leave, in addition to his role of teacher of modern languages at Morton High. The annoyance was about pupils' use and abuse of that perennial of problems, the apostrophe, not to mention their putting English spelling on the rack. Written work often contained phrases like, "my dog's tail," as if genetics or the good Lord had conjoined them all in just one. And potatoes for sale. Hadn't the Royal Navy updated its nutritional standards since Captain Cook had offered his crew sauerkraut? He shared the belief that large numbers of people were ignorant of how to use the apostrophe, despite seeing copies of Men's Health at newsagents. He had spent twice as long as expected the previous evening correcting pupils' papers that were otherwise concerned with the interesting topic of shopping for holiday clothes. He felt exhausted, but was still alert. He asked himself, what do we need this thing for? Debenhams, Woolworths, and Bentals, which counted among the living and the dead, had dispensed with the darn thing with impunity, and the public had hardly noticed. Ever since the time of George Bernard Shaw, there had been calls for the cold-blooded murder of this most redundant of things, its having refused to die gracefully. Others had sprung to its defense, citing immortal lines of Shakespeare among others. Not to mention the mangling of names such as O'Shea, O'Riordan, and d'Iberville, which could lead to civil war and the invocation of the Emergency Powers Act. The traditionalists personally attacked the whining of the abolitionists, urging them to accept the rigors of the English language with grace. Their arguments, in contrast to the abolitionists, were largely emotive and unashamedly elitist. Floyd compared the usefulness of the apostrophe with the law that required cab drivers to carry a bale of straw in their vehicles, or that their cab roof had to be a certain height to accommodate the now outmoded top hat. Over the past few years, Floyd had become sympathetic to the minimalist credo. Not the mechanistic aim of trying to live with just 100 objects, but making everything around him earn its keep, be it material, digital, or immaterial. All around him he saw needless and pointless redundancy and complication, not only in language, but in procedures in and out of school, a cacophony of road signs and a mind-numbing mess. It polluted life in general and drained energy from people. He had parted with a number of personal effects, though he still had a long way to go. One evening, a fellow drinker had pointed out that a Dutch and a German town had completely done away with traffic lights and all but the most essential road markings, with no increase in traffic accidents. If anything, they had decreased. How would you distinguish between the houses and the houses? He was asked by one of his colleagues not so long ago. Floyd's powder was not dry. In fact, he fumbled around for any powder at all. "This sounds pretty defeatist to me," declared another. Some examples sprang to mind a little later. The minister's decree and the minister's decree. Simple workaround. Use of the if the material is in writing. When was the last time an apostrophe was heard in spoken English? And German, the main subject he taught, managed perfectly well without it in most cases. He steered clear of applying his new idea to French. Despite the purportedly logical nature of this beautiful language that tripped off the tongue, Floyd thought that it suffered from plenty of its own problems. During his younger years, he had been all too fond of the hyphen, believing it to be indispensable and even proper. It would find its way into many of his expressions, regardless of its usefulness or acceptability. Then, one late afternoon, his English teacher spent a highly fruitful half-hour going over
Sample complete. Ready to continue?